Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar for emergency management. Welcome to 2020. We're so glad that you joined us today. We're excited to be here. My name is Ryan Lencloss. I'm the Director of Public Safety Solutions here at Esri. And with me today, we've got my colleague, Jeff Barani, who's the Technical Lead for Emergency Management here at Esri. And we're excited to join you just to kick off this year, this new decade of 2020, really looking ahead at a few things. So one is certainly where we're headed in 2020 related to solutions for emergency management. We'll also do a bit of a review and kind of get back to basics a bit as we kind of plan for the new year and the new decade to make a difference. We'll talk a bit about Esri technology as well. So what's coming in terms of ArcGIS that we think is really applicable and things that we want you to track throughout the coming year from Esri's perspective. And then finally, we're going to spend a bit of time of just giving you some tips on how do you develop a strategy around everything that you've heard, because there's going to be a lot of content related to tech, and we're going to talk about versions and new applications and widgets and solutions. And so where do you start? So we'll spend a bit of time talking about a strategy, putting that together and some practical tips of where to go next. So for today's webinar, as always, everybody has been muted. So if you have any questions, just feel free to use the chat window to ask us questions throughout the webinar. We'll try to answer as many of those as we can during the webinar, but just know that if we don't get to your question, we will follow up afterwards and make sure that we get your questions answered. This is being recorded and will be posted online, so you'll be able to reference back a lot of the links, the applications, the URLs that you'll see today. So if you're taking notes, know that you can always come back, just maybe reference a slide or a reference point, and you'll be able to go back and go into that in more detail after we get done today. And then we'll certainly follow up after this with an email. So we're going to put some resource links for you. We'll put slide references, things that we talk about in detail that we think are really pertinent. We'll provide you a link to those things in an email as a follow-up for those that are attending today. So with that, thanks again for joining us. We're glad you're here. You know, it's 2020, which is amazing to me. You know, Jeff and I were preparing for this webinar today, and we started to talk about just the history and what we thought 2020 would be like. And for many of you that maybe remember when we heard the word 2020, in my mind, I always thought about this futuristic state of flying cars, and it's just amazing where we've come, right? And so a lot's happened since we've spoken last on this webinar series. So first, we hope you all had a very happy holiday, that you had time to be at home, that you had time to spend with family and friends, and certainly enjoyed a bit of rest and relaxation. And certainly as we start the new year, we hope that all of you have a great year in front of you, and just from our team to yours, just happy new year, happy 2020, as we get to formally kind of tell you that here directly on the webinar today. And if you're like Jeff and I think we both reached the end of the internet and probably expended our Netflix accounts on watching and kind of vegging out for a little bit just to reset ourselves and be ready to jump in and make a difference in 2020. And so we heard from a lot of you that you enjoyed a lot of time off. And so welcome back to the hustle and grind. And now it's time to get busy. So I wanted to say, as we looked at that, we started to have this conversation around 2020 and what does that really mean? Like, what's this shift that we hear? What's a new decade bring to us in the terms of GIS? And for GIS professionals, what should we be paying attention to? And especially as we start to apply the toolkit that we have to make better decisions and give location intelligence to all of our users and our organizations, where are we headed? And it was interesting because Jeff is in the middle of an office move. And so Jeff was cleaning out his office, doing a bit of homekeeping, as most of us do in the holidays, cleaning up. And it was funny, we started to talk and he actually provided a couple of photos and we thought it was pretty apropos to today. And if you think about 20 years ago, so 1999 going into the 2000s, I mean, that was really when we started as a company at Esri, really getting into web mapping. So the CD that's up on the screen was ArcView Internet Map Service. Those of you remember ArcIMS for the days, as version 1.0. And then I thought it was great that you found that old brochure from the 1999 Esri User Conference talking about fuzzy logic and applications in GIS. So think about 10 years ago, right? I think if we look at where we've come, even just the last 10 years, going from ArcIMS 20 years ago, forays into web mapping and web GIS now to fast forward 10 years ago, and this was the cover of an Arc user. This was the state of Virginia's, their Viper program, which was a flex viewer, one of the leading examples of getting situational awareness on a website using Flex. And many of you took advantage of that pattern and that template to put out a Flex viewer with your own widgets and your own data, and to start to expose decision makers to real-time content or near real-time content in a browser. And that was just a transformational shift for us as a company and for us as a community as we look back 10 years. And it doesn't seem that long ago, really, if you think back to Flex viewers, and actually we still see some good examples of Flex viewers that exist today. But where are we headed? And so, you know, even as we speak now, right, many of you are watching the news, you're hearing the ongoing firefight that's happening in Australia. just devastating news that's coming out on the millions and millions of acres that have been impacted. But where are we today? And so this is literally from last night, some communications that came from Australia and Encina, the group there that's working very diligently to pull data together across multiple areas in Australia. This is the hub site that's being created to collect the data that's being pushed out from those individual communities up to a kind of a holistic view for Australia. And then what you see on the right is just the visual representation of that. So think of where we've come from ArcGIS 10 years ago to the Flex Viewer environment, which took a bit of configuration and widget structure, and how that's just leapfrogged where we are today in this new modern world of WebGIS. It's pretty transformational. So it's not quite flying cars, but I think we're actually on our way to creating some really impactful things in the next decade. I can only imagine where you as a community are going to start to innovate and make a difference. So I'm excited to kind of kick things off. And so Jeff and I sat down and we had our own resolutions, right? And we decided we would look back over the last year, what we talked about, what you told us you wanted to hear about for 2020, where you told us we need to focus our efforts and where you needed help. And we came up with 4 things that we want to talk about today. So one of those is we want to make sure that we always get back to basics, right? While we look ahead and we get to these kind of transformational technologies, that we don't forget to make sure that our house is in order. Just like Jeff had to clean his office, we want to make sure that we're cleaning our GIS office, so to speak, and that we have the basics covered as we really work to then transform new things. So our second resolution will be around how do we transform workflows with new tools, with new solutions, with new thinking about how we can actually modernize and transform our business in a new way for the decade. And the third is certainly we talked about the idea of a strategy. So while it's easy to start looking and finding widgets and tools and have discussions around technologies, like how do we really put that into a plan so that we can execute on that over the next year? And so we're going to talk about that and share some thinking that we have here. And the last part is that we had a resolution, both ourselves and I hope of you to kind of challenge you, is that how do you get more engaged, and so that we as a global community of emergency management GIS professionals can really start to share our experiences, our best practices, much like we did 10 years ago with the Flex Viewers and the widgets, that people would share code and they would share widgets and they would share ideas that really then percolated throughout the community as a grassroots movement to bring us forward in WebGIS. And so as we look to 2020, just the next year ahead, we'll give you some ideas of where to get engaged and how to tell your story so that others may be inspired by what you're experiencing, or that you can ask for questions and support as we really all get together and truly make a difference in this next decade. So let's get started. Let's kind of scratch our resolutions off the list a little bit today. So let's start at the beginning, and let's say, our resolution number 1 is about getting back to basics. It really is making sure that we have our foundation set for each of our organizations to make a difference. And for many of you that joined us in our webinar series in 2019, we spent a significant amount of time talking about the basics, right? This really is the solution that we've talked about for emergency management operations. It's geared towards the response phase of emergency management, where people typically have the most issues. And it really was us holistically as a community coming together and identifying common challenges where we think GIS can make a difference. And we identified 6 key things that we talked about in depth over the last year. And it was about understanding impact from an incident. It was then estimating based on what that impact looks like for lives and property. What does that mean for resource needs and requirements? And geospatially thinking about where that means for positioning resources before an event, during an event, and where we might need to start requesting events, resources in advance. We also talked about the third thing, which was now in this world of WebGIS and real-time data, how do we continue to keep a pulse on the rapidly changing conditions of any incident, both small and large? So the ability to pull in data feeds from both authoritative providers from like the federal government, from the Weather Service, for the cone of uncertainty for the hurricane, or for the fire perimeters like you see down in Australia. How do we continue to keep those at the forefront of our thinking to drive our decision-making in a more realistic time frame? And then we talked a lot about assessing and reporting damage. So how do we do that in the field to collect an authoritative assessment of what damage looks like in the community that allows us to report what that impact is in terms of dollars, so we meet our reporting thresholds, and then ultimately drive to the recovery phase much quicker and make sure that we achieve that. And then the last 2 were all about communication. We heard a lot and we developed a lot of thinking around how do we provide more real-time briefs. If you think about all that content that's moving and all the applications coming together, how do we put that into something that's actually in front of us in real time, so that we're not having to hit pause on all of our cadence and put together static PowerPoints and screenshots, but truly looking at things in a more real-time operational cadence to allow the operational period to kind of shrink down, if you will. and then communicating that both to our partners where it's appropriate securely, and then externally with the media and the public to say, this is where we need you to take action. So if you haven't joined us for a webinar before, there are a ton of resources with which you can start that process. There are 3 main buckets of thinking that we talked about. So if you're looking to get back to basics and you want to make sure your GIS emergency management house is in order for 2020, before you move forward to the next phase about transformation, start here, right? So the first thing I want you to think about is, how do you maintain situational awareness today, right? Are you monitoring those changing conditions? Are you putting your operational plan in context of those conditions? Are you changing it in real time? And then ultimately, is everybody getting briefed on that situation? And so these 3 screenshots you see are solution templates that are available for you to download, to plug in, to use. The second big bucket that we talked about was around the idea of conducting damage assessment. This is pre-event, really understanding potential impacts. So the screenshot on the left shows a quick intersect of a polygon or a cone of uncertainty or an area of concern through a bunch of data sets that are important to you, your critical infrastructure, your key resources, and your demographic profile, to say who and what might be impacted. So not having to send off a request to a GIS specialist, but ultimately giving it to operational components to be able to ask questions of data in real time to understand an immediate assessment of what that might mean to them, as you then as a GIS professional start to interact and give additional intelligence and insight as to what that really looks like. And on the right-hand side, we spent a lot of time talking damage assessment in 2019. So this is Survey 123, a mobile application that works in a connected or disconnected environment to collect information in a form-based environment, following a windshield or rapid assessment, or even implementing the FEMA preliminary damage assessment forms in the US that allow you to pull together IA and PA, and eventually, as you see on the middle, report back into a dashboard that says, this is what the structural damage looks like, and this is what the assessment is to date based on valuation of property and like uninsured. These, again, are solution templates you can download. You can start to implement and configure with your data and get started more quickly. And the last phase we really talk about is the idea of communicating effectively to the public. This is a public information map template that allows you to publish through social media channels or through your website a responsive application that works well in a browser-based environment, on a smartphone or tablet, so it meets the person at the other end wherever they are in that incident, whether they're in a vehicle trying to evacuate or whether they're at home trying to understand what actions to take for protective measures. So these 3 key things are where you should really come back to basics. So we don't want to lose sight of that again. I think it's so important for all of us just to keep that in mind, that, use that that list of 6 capabilities, if you will, as a checklist, right? And I would say, just do an honest assessment of your organization, the maturity. Like, do you have a way to understand potential impact or collect damage assessment in the field? And if you already have something, that's amazing. Keep doing that and get better at that so that it's institutionalized and sustained, right? People use it and rely on it. If you find there's a gap against one of those 6 things, take a look at the solution templates that we made available. It's a great place to start, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can download that, implement it, and get started today. And if you're hearing about all this for the first time, or you want to kind of take a look at that assessment and really understand where you go, there's 2 quick links that I want to point out to you. The top one, go.esri.com/emops1, is a landing page that will tell you that story that I just told you in a little more detail. It'll provide links to look at the solution templates. You can find out more about how to do that and what options there are for both you to do it yourself, or if you need help from Esri to help you do it, there's a way we can help you there also. So start there if you've never heard that story, if you want to go back and really think about it. The second link is about downloading the new ebook. So at go.esri.com/emops, that's where you're going to find a whole starting point, that this is really the playbook, right? It gives you that story that I was told, plus case studies of how others are doing that exact workflow organization. So if you're sitting down and you're trying to develop a plan, this is a great place to start. And if you haven't read the new ebook, it's a short read. I promise it won't put you to sleep. So start there. This is a great place to get our basics back in line, make sure the foundation is set for us to move forward and really make a difference from there. All right, so resolution number 1, make sure we're all kind of taking notes and we're getting across that. Scratch them off, do your checklist. Let us know how we can help, right? If you have questions about those, we'll continue to talk about those key patterns as we go into 2020. But I want to transition to our second resolution that Jeff and I came up with, which is that we also want to figure out how we better transform our organizations to make a difference in the new decade. That involves taking a look at both new solutions that are coming, just like we talked about the basics. There's some new things we're working on that we want to give you a roadmap for 2020 so that you know what's coming. And then we're going to take a look at ArcGIS technology as well. So where is our technology going as a company that we think is really applicable to emergency management, and things that we want you to keep a pulse on through all of our events and webinars this year, and start to think about it, how you implement those to transform what you do as an organization. So with that, I'm going to pause. I'll turn it over to Jeff Barani, let him take it from here, and we'll come back and we'll end up on a strategy and next steps. So Jeff, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Great, thanks Ryan, and good morning everyone. Yeah, I certainly want to echo Ryan's welcome and wishes for a happy new year. As you mentioned, kind of chatting about, resetting for the year and the decade, and kind of reflecting, where we've been and all that, and hopefully, in the rest of the holidays, you got a chance to kind of reflect and think about, what's next and how you can make a difference and what you kind of want to work on next. And so it seemed, today's webcast seemed very appropriate, for us to, before the year really gets going in full swing, we can start to think about some of those things, as obviously many challenges that we're, facing already, the fires and bushfires in Australia, earthquakes in Puerto Rico and the like. So certainly no rest, and we're off and running here in 2020. And thinking about, transforming a workflow, we'll think about this from, where can we apply technology kind of across the spectrum of missions within emergency management? Obviously, heavy focus, on response, as Ryan mentioned, but as we kind of go through some of these solutions and, technology slides, maybe think about, what are some of the other areas or other business units within, emergency management or public safety that could be, supported with, the technology, and hopefully you'll walk away with some of those, ideas, today. So, and just one more thing real quick before, jumping in, just thinking about what's the end of the decade going to look like, right? If we saw the Viper app and Flex Viewer on the cover of Arc News in the fall of 2009, what's going to be on the cover of Arc News in 2029, right? Is it going to be, something about AI or wearables or flying cars or autonomous vehicles? I'm kind of hoping for holograms or something like that, like Princess Leia or Snoke or something. But anyways, just kind of having a little bit of fun with kind of thinking things in a bigger, in the bigger picture. So with that, we're going to kind of dig in and give you some real kind of tangible things that are, on the horizon for the next, year or so from a technology perspective. But first, we're starting here with. So the first thing that's on the docket coming up here shortly is the flood impact analysis solution template. So this will be coming here, by the end of the month. So this is an update to an existing solution. This is based on ArcGIS Pro, and really helping you take the results of, flood analysis and visualizing it and helping to understand, the impact. Obviously, with advances in, 3D, you can see, great, renderings here of what the potential impact might look like. As a side note, this doesn't do the flood modeling for you. This just kind of takes the results of the analysis that you do and being able to look at that in new ways. In some cases, that analysis may have already been done for some areas or some jurisdictions. In other cases, you may need to do that yourself and then add it into this solution. The other big thing that's coming out here from a solutions template here in the short term is a series of special event management solution templates. So there'll be two kind of bundles that will come out. One is really kind of helping with the permitting side of the house. How are things getting submitted? How are the plans getting marked up? How are the approvals and planning going to go for the submission of a special event? And then the second part, really probably more apropos to public safety and the emergency management side of the house, is really looking at things from a planning and operations perspective. What's the operational plan? How can you keep track of things in real time? How can you bring in other feeds of data to get a sense of what's going on, where the units are, and that type of thing? So really exciting. A lot of work's been done by the team to put this together. And so this is another solution template that you can look forward to coming here in the short term. Additionally, there's been work that's been done on a specific initiative template for Hub. So in this case for emergency management. So if you had a specific event, how can you pull together a lot of information, make a a really nice looking modern destination to communicate your story, get information out to the public, provide summary information from GIS data and the like, and invite feedback from the community. So this is a prototype of something that's being put together now, and so look for that sometime in late Q1, early Q2 of this year. If you haven't, also we wanted to highlight, if you haven't seen it, definitely check out the solution deployment tools. These are a set of tools that work with inside ArcGIS Pro that help you lay down the solution templates in your org very quickly. So they really should have called this, or could have called this, the Impress Your Boss quickly button, right? And give you the ability to pick this various solution templates that you want to lay down, put those in your org very quickly, and get those containers going, and then allowing you to once those are down, to configure those really to meet the needs of your organization. So we'll lay down all of the appropriate apps, maps, and layers that really will do the job of getting going quickly with some of these solution templates. In this case, the emergency management operations set of templates that Ryan talked about is what's highlighted here, but any of the solution templates can get laid down with these tools. Another thing to keep an eye on throughout the year, and just a little hint here, is that later this year solutions will be made available natively in both an ArcGIS Online and Enterprise. So in other words, you won't have to use the deployment tools to lay this down. There's a different technique that's being worked on to provision these capabilities with inside the organizations or your enterprise accounts very quickly. So something to keep an ear out for sure as that kind of continues to evolve. Lastly, at least from the solution side, just wanted to mention that there are, rich set of, symbols that get updated with, every release. So there's both an online and a pro version of styles for both, a government set of symbols as well as, public safety. So some of you have seen, the web versions, but may not be aware that there's a pro style available for both of those as well. And again, they welcome feedback for the user community and continue to evolve that, over time. So that really quickly, that's just a quick update at looking at things from a solutions perspective. Next, we wanted to kind of get into technology. And so from a technology perspective, there's a lot we're going to cover. And so just as a disclaimer, there's a lot of information that we're going to cover and share here. Ryan made me cut down my slides from 200 to 45, so we'll do our best to get through a lot of information quickly. So certainly a lot to cover. Our product teams have been hard at work responding to the needs of you all, and really building and configuring, updating these tools and technology to meet really the needs of the user community. A lot of these topics could be a whole webcast in and of themselves. So we're just going to give a cursory glance into some new things and some new updates that are being made to some existing tools. And our hope is really that you'll see something, or you'll give you an idea and really cause you to dig in and wanted to learn more about something, or give it a try, like quick capture or something like that, or perhaps even get involved and provide feedback to us and the teams that are developing it. There's also a lot that we're not going to cover. There's only so much time we have this morning to spend with you, but wanted to just kind of give you a quick highlights from a general kind of what's new, a focus on a set of updates from the office perspective, and then finally from the field. All right, so let's get started here. So last December, ArcGIS Online updated. Obviously, ArcGIS Online updates 3 times a year. Bernie from the team really does a good job of synthesizing and pulling together a lot of the information that's updated and pertinent to the release. And so certainly you'll have the link to this blog post and other links throughout that we'll share through the course of the webinar. But a couple of highlights from last year that folks may not be aware of is, one, last year they introduced what's called an attachment viewer, right? So for example, if you're out doing damage assessment and taking photos and of surveying the damage, there's a specific app that is really focused on helping you view the photos and images that were taken from the field and stored as attachments really quickly as a part of an app. So obviously using the map to kind of give a tour and give an update on a sense of the potential impact by quickly pulling together the photos and videos that may have been taken from the field. Last year, there was a very focused app called the Media Map app, that was put together here to allow folks to have a really focused app, really highlighting the map, allowing you to have a, small section to be able to give a description of what, folks are looking at, really simple, light, lean, to really kind of keep things focused. So that was another app that was released last year. Last summer also there was a new app called the Zone Lookup app, and so in this case what we're looking at here is an configuration of this application for the public safety shut-off last year, obviously with all the fire threats in California. This app was configured really quickly to let people understand if they would be impacted by the shut-off or not. So just one example of configuring that app, very quickly. One of the major themes that you'll hear through the course of 2020 and beyond is leveraging some of the updates that have been made to the underlying technology. And so in this case, actually looking at updates to the JavaScript API, and then that's brought forth in many different applications or parts of the platform. So in this case, one thing that's available now that just came out recently was a new map viewer. So this is in beta right now. All of you should have access to this as a part of ArcGIS Online. So it basically is leveraging the new updates to the JavaScript API and really kind of reimagining, re-envisioning the way that you interact with composing your web maps in the platform to get, to use directly and or be used in other parts of the platform through various apps. So this is definitely something that's currently in development. A lot of work will be done on this through the course of the year. So something to pay attention to for sure. Start to play with this, start to get used to this, start to even provide feedback as this continues to develop and grow throughout the year. Another key thing that we really wanted to make sure that folks became aware of is how the real-time feeds have been evolving. Feeds really have become almost dial tone services for many applications, obviously, a great benefit from a situational awareness perspective. And the Living Atlas team has been working on transitioning the way our live feeds are delivered, now kind of moving towards feature layers and hosted feature services. As a result of that, no subscription or logins required to be able to add these, to your map. So most of the feeds have been, transitioned with the exception of a couple. So the earthquakes hasn't been done yet. That will release here very shortly, and the wildfire activity still needs to be updated. So the old ArcGIS server versions of these feeds will continue to be around for some time, but just wanted to highlight that there's been some updates and changes made available with these as well. Really quickly, the web application builder continues to get more and more enhancements, added, late last year, adding in things like, business analyst widgets that allow you to create reports and leverage the rich demographic and data variables, right from the web app builder environment. There's a threat analysis, kind of a bomb standoff type tool that's also been, added in. A couple of other things is that the directions widget now takes into account, barriers. So if you need to route around a flooded streets or other, obstructions, those can be, added in, directly. In addition to many other kind of enhancements across the set of web app builder tools. Just kind of taking a step back and looking at this, holistically, some of the key widgets from a public safety emergency management perspective include the situational awareness widget. That's part of the tools that Ryan briefed, earlier. Info summary, the emergency response guide, threat analysis, as we mentioned. The near me widget we've seen, used quite a bit. That's actually configured as a part of the public information template. And then finally, the gridded, reference guide if you needed to lay over the U.S. national grid, for example, in terms of your apps. That's the tool that you can do there. So a lot of enhancements over the past year with Web App Builder. One of the things, looking forward is the ArcGIS Experience Builder. So this again is built on the 4X version of the JavaScript API. This is in beta, right now, and we'll kind of reimagine the experiences for configuring web apps in a variety of different ways. So we won't get into this in too much detail, this morning, but something to be aware of for sure. tour. You can, get access to this directly already today at experience@arcgis.com and start to play with it, start to see, what's there, and start to learn some of the new patterns from applying the technology as this finalizes over the course of the year. Next, wanted to talk a little bit about story maps. Story maps have been, kind of the darling of one of the darling apps of the public safety emergency management, community over the past couple of years, and they're moving already to the next generation of these, tools. So this launched, last summer. Some of the capabilities of kind of quote unquote classic story maps, have already been ported over. Certainly not everything that will, some things will come over through the course of time, and there'll also be new features that'll be added through the course of this, like a slideshow mode that was just recently, introduced. So the classic story maps will continue to work as they do today through, next summer. So obviously, many of you are using, tab story maps today for sharing situation awareness apps. Those probably best to continue with those, as they exist kind of today, and over time, over the next, year and a half, some of that technology and techniques will update and move, but certainly a lot to kind of look at today. So before this, this kind of cut over, before this kind of comes into play, certainly something to look at now and start to see what you can, leverage. Many great examples that every week the story map team will, release a new update to their kind of quote unquote weekly snapshot of what's going on. There's a set of story maps that introduce the concepts in these kind of, existing tools today that you can take a look at. And again, we'll share these links with you through the webcast. And we've already seen some, great examples. GIS Core just recently released their kind of, year in review in a new story map. And as you saw the link there, we'll provide, the state of Oregon kind of told the story of some of the events that happened to them this past spring. In this case, in this, little video, we're just kind of showing the highlights of the app. Obviously, you can bring in the map, images, videos to really kind of tell the story of an event, almost as if you're, a newspaper reporter kind of telling the story of an event, and having inside the story map, various elements like the map or an express map or sidecars here to be able to quickly kind of tell the story in a really kind of compelling way to get your message out, more broadly to your stakeholders, to those in your, jurisdiction. So something definitely to explore and play with, today, as there's a lot of great capabilities already in terms of the tools that are already, released. Perhaps one other thing to scratch and add to your kind of to-do list for 2020 is to get to know Arcade more. So this is the expression language that's used across many of the apps, including the web apps and the like. And one of the reasons that I wanted to highlight this here and this morning is one of the things that you'll see over the course of the year is the operations dashboard will make more and more use of Arcade and allow you to, trick out your operations dashboards even more using the power, of Arcade. So this is something definitely to get to know, to get used to, and to learn more about, as it will be, very powerful ways to leverage this and use this in various apps to get key information to your decision makers, to your operations staff about what they need to do and understand. Already we've seen and learned from many of you that have engaged with us on great uses of Hub, from Cal OES to some of the examples that we shared in apps and data and services that we shared during Hurricane Dorian, using Hub. So I've seen CUSEC, use this both for exercises and normal kind of day-to-day use. So Hub is definitely a technology to be able to look at, for sure. And for you all today, some areas to kind of think about in terms of how you might use Hub. I thought this was something that our product team shared that I thought was really helpful. This kind of gave me a new frame of reference and a new way of thinking about how you can use Hub in your jurisdiction. The classic example may be, for open data sites, right? How can we share data publicly? Want to make open data accessible and discoverable by many. Some other ideas here are around the idea of sites, right? How can we help improve understanding of an issue? How can we make, quick, good-looking, modern, sites that help deliver information, maps, apps, data around a specific topic. It also allows us to have collaboration with the community. So through the premium version of Hub, there's a lot we can do to engage with the community, directly, get, feedback from them, really kind of deputize them as a part of the team to share, collect, and get information. And then finally, kind of initiatives. How can we work, more collaboratively around some key focus areas of interest, whether that be a specific incident like the solution template example that you saw, before, or there's a specific education topic that you want to get information out on, such as mitigation, for example, or a specific, project that may be going on your, jurisdiction. So I thought this list maybe, for me at least, got me thinking, what are some new ways that we can think about using Hub in some very specific and tactical ways to help us out as a part of our work. So the third kind of part of the technology update that we wanted to talk about this morning is looking at how the suite of field tools and field operation tools are evolving and continuing to grow, and really kind of thinking about this from a holistic perspective, right? So most everyone, a lot of people maybe just simply focus on the capture, phase, if you will, getting information, from the field, but just know that there's a lot of other companion, parts of this workflow, across all phases, including monitoring, keeping track of what's going on. How can we coordinate and make sure folks are going to the right areas, that we don't miss some of the work, and plan appropriately. And there's a suite of apps kind of across the spectrum that come into play to support a lot of that work. Obviously, collector, survey 123, now we'll add it in, quick capture to the collection, tracker and workforce there for sure. And there's other kind of apps that are also pair well with this, operations dashboard for tracking, for example. And we're not going to get into too much today, but Mission will also be a coming kind of very nice companions to this suite of apps as that kind of continues to evolve. So just really quickly wanted to provide a couple of quick updates on some of the key apps here. So from a capture perspective, looking at collector for ArcGIS, that continues to evolve. Some of the recent updates that just came out a couple of days ago in the most recent release included snapping, obviously being able to take advantage of the geographic features, more directly and snap features together. We could also do update multiple features at the same time, and a lot of kind of streamlining a lot of the workflow to improve the work here. So smart forms will be coming to collector, later on, during the year. So that's another area to look at. Survey 123, this has seen a real explosion of use of Survey 123 across the community, over the past year, really kind of the form-based way to collect data. And certainly that team has heard a lot of feedback from you. They did a recent, the team did a recent webcast, the emergency management webinar series this year, to provide a lot of updates. Some of the key things, including, being smart with query parameters to either exchange or get data kind of passed in as you're filling, out forms. A lot of, updates to really, create a digital environment for capturing data that's much like a lot of the paper forms that people may be, traditionally used to in terms of the questions and the layouts and signatures and the like. A pictorial list is something that's been added in recently, obviously kind of from almost like a big button perspective. How can we provide kind of pictures as a way to inputting data to get better quality data in as a part of things. Lines and polygons, this has been a long time request from to the Survey 123 team, and this has recently been added in and supported. Also the ability to update existing features, and in this example, even using existing features to pass in data to a new element that's being added here, so we can use values from existing features to help streamline the collection work that's being done here. And for those that are missing, ArcPad, the idea of being able to watermark our images and data as we capture them, whether that's the job ID, the U.S. National Grid coordinate, or the like. So that's a recent addition. Also, something that's evolving right now is the ability to create reports of an individual feature. A Word document today, PDF here coming very soon. So the reporting is an area that continues to grow. And really there's a lot that can be done with automation here and webhooks and leveraging other modern technology today to really streamline workflow. So again, something else to look at. A lot of resources from the team on YouTube to be able to dig in and learn more. Another recent update over the past year has been an app called Quick Capture. So the idea here is it kind of as it states in the name is to be able to use big button type inputs to collect data quickly to really at speed get that data in. So so in this case looking at just a quick example of configuring the damage assessment solution template now using Quick Capture. So we can see here the various types that we want to collect. Do we want to, in this case in designer mode, make decisions about do we want to have a photo taken with that? Do we want to have a field that people type in very quickly? So there's no map interface for this when people are collecting data. It's just based on their kind of current location, but it's a really kind of quick way to get information in. So think about those requests that you've gotten before from teams that or users that needed to get data in very quickly. Quick Capture may be a great way to augment some of this stuff. So here's just a quick look at trying to compare and contrast the various features from kind of a capture perspective as you're looking to make decisions about what app is appropriate. Do you need to edit existing data, or do you need really complex skip logic in your forms when collecting data, almost kind of choose your own adventure where survey 123 may come into play? Or do you need really big buttons to get things kind of at speed? Or do you need the ability to snap features together and really leverage the rich geographic set of data that's you've already collected and have as a part of your organization? So just some ideas here about how to kind of compare as you're making decisions on what tool to use. Obviously with survey 123 you can have web forms using survey 123 to collect data anonymously, and with Quick Capture that's actually something that can be used as a part of ArcGIS Premium, so certainly something we can get into in a later web class, but just really quick some other kind of comparisons things there. As we're winding out, obviously from a planning perspective, Workforce has come on over the past couple of years to really help plan and coordinate field work. One of the things I wanted to highlight this morning is that they'll be working on supporting offline workflows through the course of this year. So that's feedback that they've heard from the community, and that will be coming in a later release. And then the last app that we wanted to talk about here this morning is Tracker. So really being able to leverage the motion APIs on the devices to log the locations in really kind of unattended way of where teams are in the field, both last known location as well as kind of the breadcrumbs. With Tracker, that introduces a couple of apps, or a mobile app that can run unattended in the background, the ability to have a web viewer to see where those things are, or where your users are, and really kind of looking at that in a direct way. And then finally, essentially the tracks and the last known locations just become layers that you can add into your existing app. So this last example here is from the Rose Parade from just a couple of days ago, the granddaddy of them all. So in this case, tracking not only the public safety assets, fire engines, EMS units, and like, as well as the floats. And so you'll hear more about this kind of story and use of the technology, later on through the years. We'll kind of communicate that, but really just wanted to share with you, Tracker now is a quick way to be able to track teams here in real time, and now just have that become another layer or set of layers for you that you can augment into your apps. So I realize that was a whirlwind tour. We covered a lot of technology quickly. Again, hopefully there's some things that you can dig into and learn more, and hopefully we sparked your interest in some various areas through the course of development. And certainly, as I mentioned, there's a lot that we didn't cover. There's other updates to Pro and Enterprise and Mission, and things from our partners and the like. So certainly a lot of technology updates to certainly keep us busy over the next decade. But those are some quick highlights that we wanted to share with you this morning as you kick off your 2020 and think about what's next to supporting some of the key missions that you all are working on. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Ryan to think about how we plan to put some of this stuff in action. So back over to you, Ryan.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. All right. So number 2 of our resolution was how do we transform our workflow? So hopefully, as Jeff said, you've got ideas now. And so let's think about how we develop a strategy, because what we just showed was a whole bunch of technology, a whole bunch of ideas that we hope just spurred your interest. And we also have the basics that we need to cover on the back end. And so the question maybe in your mind is like, where do I start and how do I get all of that into something that I can manage the digital transformation of my agency, not just start plugging in technology just for technology's sake. And so I would just caution, right? So as GS professionals, I think a lot of times that we start to think of the technology bits first, right? It's the first thing in our mind because it's what we're used to, it's where we're comfortable, right? We're looking at the challenges in front of us that we have, maybe older versions of ArcGIS, we have training that we need to get people up to speed, maybe there's unreliable servers and infrastructure. Those things immediately come to mind and they're not wrong. But that leads us down the path of thinking immediately about, well, do I need to upgrade to something else? Do I need to deploy a new bit of technology? And do I need to then figure out a way to go to the cloud and migrate stuff between my on-premise servers and ArcGIS Online? Or do I need to get that hub site up and running to be able to deliver that? And I would say that the challenge when we immediately go to a technology conversation component is that when we sit down and we try to articulate the vision that you've got, right, as a GS professional, with that operational arm of your agency or the financial arm of your agency, it opens up tons of questions that you may not have answers for, right? Because if you think about if we're building this and we're training and we're improving that, they're going to start asking a series of questions that cascade pretty quickly. Well, how much does that cost? What's the demand? What are we going to do? Is that something we do this year in the fiscal year? Is it next fiscal year? And so starting with a technology conversation first puts, I think, your ability to transform and align to the business of the organization before you transform at risk. And so my resolution for you for 2020 is to just pause on the technology side for a minute. Certainly it's important to learn and to know and to explore and to innovate and test, right? So I'm not saying stop that. What I'm suggesting is that before you start to just propose a technology solution, make sure that you're aligned on the business challenges for your agency, right? Understanding where your operations section chief has a challenge or the situation unit has a challenge in briefings or how the field teams that are getting deployed interact with paper forms or a challenge that they've had in reporting in real time. And if you can do that, right, you can really start to build a case for how you then apply all of that technology in a more transformative way. And what I mean by that is it's not just build a technology for technology. Say you're actually helping solve a problem for your agency. And when we see that happen, that's where we see good transformation. That's where you see all the examples come from is when people like yourselves that know the technology, right, a technical leader within that, find a champion inside of the organization. That may be your boss. It may be somebody in the other section of the emergency management agency that you latch onto and you drink coffee with all the time, and she's an amazing person to lead you into the future, and she is your champion about the use of geospatial and location intelligence. That's great. Now, who's the executive sponsor, right? Maybe it's the same person that's your champion. Maybe it is your boss. Maybe it's a CIO. Maybe it's a director. So I would say that the important part of being able to align around the business and then apply your knowledge of technology to that business problem is getting your team put together so that you're not working in a silo, that you're delivering technology that makes a difference and changes the way workflows are actually accomplished in your agency. When you do that, that's where we see these cataclysmic shifts inside of organizations with adoption of technology. So here's how you can do that, right? So my suggestion to kind of like 2020, if you're thinking about resolutions, it would be number one, so get out of your office, right? Go make friends inside the agency, ask them to sit down with a cup of coffee. I told this story a lot, is like the importance of the cup of coffee is often overlooked, right? It's just a matter of sitting down and saying, hey, I'm a GS professional. You may not know what I do. You probably think I make maps, but I really just want to know what keeps you up at night, right? What are you focused on from a mission perspective that worries you? And you'll be surprised maybe what the answer is. But just start to listen, right? Don't come with an answer, but just listen, right? And take notes, observe, be a part of that conversation, be active in that conversation, and be interested in that conversation about what they're telling you about where they're challenged. And for those of you on the other side of that scale, if you are on the operations side and you're not a technician, you're not a GIS professional, go the other direction, right? Go to that back office room and knock on the door, the person that has all the pretty maps on the wall and graphics, and say, hey, can we go have a cup of coffee? I'd like to just learn more about what you have for technology because I got a bunch of challenges that I'd like to share. And that simple conversation will start this process right here on the screen, which is that there's a shared understanding of the mission, the vision, and the key things that you collectively need to work towards as an organization. And with that, you can start to develop a plan, right? So now we can start to apply a bit of thinking about where do we go first? What's the most important thing on our list of of that now that we have a shared understanding. And then you take action, which is bring all those technology components that you're so great at as a GS professional to bear to transform that workflow, to change that process. And so just some simple examples of how that might work. Just sit down together once you've understood kind of the mission, the challenges, and you've documented what those projects, so to speak, are, and just collectively understand like the business value. So if you're the operations person or the director, that's your job, right? You're going to set the value, like this is really important to me. It keeps me up at night. If we can solve this challenge, we are making a difference for our community. And then the ease to launch as a technologist, that's your job to say, hey, I think we have a bit of technology. That seems like something we could configure, or it's going to take a bit more custom work. And together you plot the dot on the map, right? And it literally is easy to launch from hard on the left to easy on the right, and business value that it provides to the agency, low at the bottom, high on the top. And when you do that, you'll quickly start to see where you can focus. The quick wins in the top right, maybe things you want to focus on immediately to increase buy-in and interest in the use of technology for the agency. And then you work over to the high value content, and then you maybe work your way down once you've got those accomplished into the harder things to do and lower business value over time. But this gives you a roadmap to follow, right? And these things can change. So as your year progresses, as the decade progresses, your agency progresses, these dots will move around. And so keeping that conversation ongoing is so important. And so once you've done that, you've assigned it, you start, how do you act? Well, it's pretty easy at that point. We're going to prepare together. You're going to define what you think the solution is. It's going to be a bit of this technology, a bit of that data that's coming in from that, a bit of this training that we're going to put together. You'll build and test it. You'll start to execute and roll that out. You're going to monitor how well it performs. Are people interacting with it the way we thought they would? Are the big buttons the right big buttons for the field team to push? And if not, then go back and just iterate and make that a bit better. Make your changes incrementally. And then certainly you want to share the success of that activity both inside of your organization so that adoption starts to occur, but also with others, right? Share your story with other people and make sure that it's being utilized and that others see the success you have, because everybody's looking for what's working for others, right? We have very similar challenges back to where we started getting the basics right. Those 6 things that we talked about as basics are really common. And so work through this, and it never ends, right? You should always be circling back, working on understanding, working on a plan and reprioritizing your workload, and then bring all your technologies to bear. And I think if you think in those regards of understand, plan, and act, the sustainability and the impact you're going to have on your agency will be transformational. I think that's truly one way to do that. So just put that as a challenge and start thinking about that. And you could certainly start that process on a napkin and then start those coffee conversations from there. All right, so the 4th resolution for 2020 to end us out today is much where I just ended, which is let's get more engaged. That is, get engaged inside of your agency. So let's start there. So if you are new to your agency and you are looking for ways to show the value of GIS to your agency that maybe just now starting the process, or you're an operations folks and you're sitting here and you're saying, man, I really want to figure out how we get that technology embedded into what we do more at a regular cadence. And during blue sky days, look at exercises. Exercise, exercise, exercise. We do it all the time in emergency management, and it's a perfect place for GIS professionals to get engaged, to sit side by side, and to learn, to listen, to start looking at how you develop technology solutions to address some of the challenges that you're going to experience in gray sky days. These are 2 fun examples, right? I love these examples. So on the left-hand side, this is from Colorado and Weld County during GIS Day. The emergency management department at the county, along with all the school districts, came together and they did a zombie exercise. And so they had kids playing with this, they had professionals playing with this, but using GIS to both show the scenario, but then also have people interact with things like creating new zombie hordes or destroying zombie hordes. Are we doing the right things? So they can be fun examples too, because that's a stress-free environment to test and play and learn. And on the right-hand side, at a different scale, this was the national level exercise for 2019 that the Central U.S. Earthquake Consortium, or CUSEC, brought to bear in partnership with FEMA, with multiple states there like Kentucky and the central part of the U.S. to talk about how they do information sharing better at multi-states and multi-jurisdictional scale. So you see their briefing ongoing about the scenario and the injects about how the event is unfolding. And in the bottom right, the hub that's bringing all the content together, literally information sharing from the county level up for the 8 states of the CUSEC region, sharing in real time status on lifeline indicators, for example. So exercises are a great place, and it's not going to be an immediate, and we built this and it's successful, right? Exercises are meant to test, to stretch, and to look for opportunities to invest. And so Just a bit of guidance, where do you start in that process? Well, if you are thinking how GIS can support, there's three main buckets I'll leave you with. So the first is, as a GIS professional, we can help with assessing where there's needs for exercise. So operations folks have gut instincts and know, based on risk assessments and analysis in their mind, where there's opportunity. Make sure you're applying GIS to that process. So help your planners and exercise designers understand in your map-based environment what risk looks like and what the exposure is to your community, so that you pick geographically relevant areas and geographically relevant hazards to exercise against. So use that data to help make decisions and hone in on real vulnerabilities and gaps based on data. And then the second thing is, use the tools that you've got at your disposal to help develop accurate scenarios and injects. So how many times have we been in an exercise and everybody laughs at the inject that came in because there's no way that's realistic, or there's no way it would be that small or that big. So let's get more realistic then. So let's use GIS to understand accurate numbers for impact of people or infrastructure or the resource requirements, and give them accurate assessments to rightly scope and scale the exercise, and more importantly, the injects around the exercise, to test those deficiencies and gaps based on data. And you can use that data throughout both the design and then transition directly into conduct, right? Because now you've got a data set, you've got the injects, you have an understanding of what the exercise is. When we're conducting the exercise, you've got the data, your real world analyzed to show it in real time, just like you saw for QSEC, or made up against the zombie hordes, which was based on real population data. And you can start to create and prototype decision support tools at that point, like dashboards, to help illustrate how this comes together, and then use those every day to then pick up on that cadence we just described about building a strategy. So think about exercises. The second thing to leave you with on getting engaged in 2020 is, don't be shy about telling your story, right? I think we all love to hear what you're doing here at Esri, but more importantly, others around the world want to hear what you're doing as well. And so there's a number of ways this year in 2020 just to get on your screen and on your calendar to come tell your story. So the first is, for those in the federal space and working in the DC area, the United States, this February is our federal GIS conference. We have a public safety neighborhood and sessions. We'll be deep diving on technology, so come join us, come be a part of that. In the middle of the year, for the user conference timeframe in July in San Diego, this is our international user conference timeframe. On the front end of that, we have an Esri National Security and Public Safety Summit. That's July 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th in San Diego, on the front end of the user conference, which then occurs the 13th through the 17th. So last year, 19,000 people from around the world came together. Almost 750 folks came into the National Security Public Safety Summit to share best practices and thought leadership on their side, just like you can, to everybody else about how to make a difference in public safety and national security. So we're looking for presenters. We're looking for folks that want to tell their story at those events. So come join us. Also know that if you have complimentary passes because you're an Esri user to the user conference, you can apply those complimentary passes to the National Security and Public Safety Summit. So one pass for the user conference can be applied to the National Security and Public Safety Summit, so there'll be no cost to attend for registration. And then you could use a second pass to then attend the user conference. So one pass applies to each event. If you have two passes, you could come to the whole week and spend time with us. If you have questions on that or you want to know more, you can email us at the email you see in the top right corner, publicsafetyinfo@esri.com. For that. And then the last thing is, if you can't make it to San Diego, you can't make it to DC for the bigger conferences, we are changing the way that we run the regional user conferences to be more inclusive of all disciplines. So we met many of you last year in New Orleans at the conference. We met many of you in Philadelphia in the conference. So know that the next two on the calendar so far are in the Midwest in Chicago and the Southeast in Atlanta. So we'd love to see you there. Come be a part of the public safety conversation at those events. And then certainly if you've got a great story you think is just amazing and you want to share it with us, email us. Tell us about your story. Submit a story to us for one of our publications like ArcGIS or ArcNews. We would love to help you tell that and work with you on that. And you can just email those ideas to publicsafetyinfo@esri.com, and we will help you spread the word and tell others out there about what the good work you're up to. So with that, we only have a couple of minutes left. We've answered a lot of questions online here as we go, but one question, Jeff, that came up that I think maybe we could just touch on briefly here in a minute or so is, what is mission again? So we briefly touched on it in the roadmap and looking ahead, so we'll talk more about it later in 2020, but could you maybe just again reposition ArcGIS mission? I think people have heard that name and they're interested from a field mobility standpoint, maybe what that means in the context again. Anything to say at this point?
Yeah, just really quickly, so Mission really complements our existing, field suite of apps. It's really focused on kind of the coordinate and kind of planning, phases of work there, really allowing the responders, the folks in the field to communicate with each other and the operations center kind of in a peer-to-peer, way. So this is a tool that runs an ArcGIS Enterprise that requires a server, a kind of component for that to run. So you'll learn more about that, this year, but it's really kind of the peer-to-peer communication part that's really the most compelling part of Mission, and in addition to kind of tracking responders. So yeah, more to learn throughout the year for sure.
Excellent, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, we're excited about Mission. I think it meets a sweet spot in our technology, that peer-to-peer chat and component and organization. So as Jeff said, alluded to, see more of that at our conferences at FedGIS and moving forward, and certainly we'll spend more time. There is a beta program, so certainly if you have interest, just feel free to email, reach out. We can get you more context about ArcGIS Mission as well. And with that, we're at the top of the hour, so thank you for joining us. I hope that our resolutions, the 4 that we laid out in front of you, are something that resonates and you can use to build momentum inside of your organization and transform to make a difference in the new decade. We'll be back together again on April 2nd for the next webinar. If you have feedback for us, certainly you're going to get a chance when you hang up today to fill out a little bit of a questionnaire to give us feedback about what you'd like to talk about moving forward. But thanks again for joining us. Here's to a great 2020. We look forward to seeing you at many of our events coming up. Anything you need from us at all, let us know. Thanks again. Have a good rest of the day.